My involvement with Grace started, in a sense, the moment I moved to LA, because Paul was my neighbor and the first person that I met. He had basically just finished making the short. I just watched it and was blown away, and then he started sending me the drafts as he was writing them.
Similar to the preparation that Zorn and I did, Austin and I spent hours and hours and hours for literally years poring over the script and figuring out exactly how we were going to do things.
My philosophy working with a director is to try to make it feel not like my score for their movie, but our score for our movie. The main thing for me is to do everything in my power to get on that same wavelength with the director so that they are one mind with mine. I feel that's really important with every single film I do, so that score is so steeped in that film. It has to feel like it only could have been made in that time in my career with that director, just so specific. So even though we were really good friends, we went into this film thinking, this is either going to be an amazing collaboration or it's absolutely going to end our friendship. Paul and I both, I think, as our first instinct, approach something hoping to plan the living hell out of it and then just hope everything goes according to plan.
The reality of filmmaking is that you show up and everything is different. You have to be able to roll with the punches and sort of be able to exploit the limitations, and that's something that Austin completely gets.
All this planning and all this thinking went in, and then it was like, oh, by the way, we don't have budget or really time to do an orchestral approach.
Rather than trying to half-ass a purely orchestral score when your budget is limited, Austin said, all right, fine. This just pushes me in this direction. It just informs your choices.
In the same way that I think Paul had to really roll with the punches on set and ended up creating a film that was perhaps even more unique and more unexpected than the script showed going into production, the score most certainly that resulted from these limitations was not at all the one that I was planning on writing going into it. While shooting, Paul called me one morning and said, there's a scene where Madeline is giving Grace a bath, and I really want Jordan to sing a lullaby to her, like ultra sweet, simple, innocent, a mother singing to her child. It was fairly easy to write something like that because it's so simple, but at the same time that also makes it incredibly difficult. Then I called Lisbeth and I said, I need you to write lyrics, I'm going to send you a piano track, here's the melody, here's the lullaby, send it back to me. So she wrote these amazing, sweet, innocent lyrics and recorded it at her studio and emailed me the track. I laid it in and sent it off to Paul.
He's hugely reliable. I've never seen any composer be so completely immersed. He's like a method composer.
I did something which I'm not normally in a position to do, which was go to the set and just kind of soak up the vibe of the production. I'm driving my rental car an hour out in the middle of nowhere. From that moment, I was already kind of digesting what the tone of this thing was going to be. The main thing that I got out of the visit to the set was that I got to basically walk around with a microphone and record every little sound this house made, because every floorboard creaked and walls kind of groaned, just sort of soaked up the sound of the house itself, put it on my flash drive, and was able to bring that back and turn most of that into musical instruments for the score. I did not want to really make a leitmotif score where I had a Madeline theme and a Vivian theme. The film is all about psychology, so a leitmotif where you're just pointing at characters was a very sort of superficial and inaccurate way to approach this film. The whole score is obsessively from Madeline's perspective. So it basically centered on this idea that Paul and I started talking about of the schism or the divergence within her, where she's starting to kind of rip in half as she loves her baby and will do anything for her, but yet is kind of almost afraid of the baby, and the score widens in its dissonance with itself until it sort of culminates at the end where Son shows up to try to take the baby away, and that's when those two halves of Jordan kind of instantly merge again, and she realizes, this is what I have to do. I am going to protect this baby no matter what the cost, at which point it kind of unifies and the score finds a newfound strength. And I traced it all out on my flowchart of exactly where I thought her mental state was, and I tried to kind of come up with a system of measuring it so I could very linearly bring about her collapse through the music. The final kind of instrumental palette for Grace was really esoteric. Every cue, in some way or another, comes from this ultra simple little lullaby. And so I know that in a few key places I really wanted to hear Lisbeth singing this. And then other instrumental sounds just kind of started to come about. I've always tied recorders with childhood. I don't want a recorder necessarily playing traditional recorder music, but I wanted to have that color in there. Other instruments just sort of became apparent in that sort of composer way. I don't have a rational explanation necessarily for using them. For example, I use my accordion a lot. I distorted the living crap out of it so that it doesn't really sound like an accordion, with the exception of the Pockle baby scene. A friend of mine had just had a baby, and I recorded an hour's worth of her choking and crying and screaming and yelling and sniffling and, you know, happy baby sounds and all kinds of stuff, which I compiled into these custom sort of sound omni-baby effects. This is just a little child lock, but you know, you feed it through slowly, and you get this kind of nice sort of grating sound that I would pitch way down and get this kind of bizarre electronic effect. The sound designer, Brett, was visiting a buddy's horse ranch where there were 10 trillion flies, and he recorded in surround the sound of the mic, where one fly would be crawling across the mic and you could hear its legs and you could hear this kind of gooey, sort of creepy thing. Everything from that to thousands and thousands of flies. Some areas of the film you hear it in a kind of literal way, and others we just sort of take that very distinctive frequency range of a fly and it just sort of becomes this anxious sort of symbol of death. The same way that the baby cries were used, where we talked a lot beforehand about how that frequency range, humans have a natural predisposition to hear much stronger than other frequency ranges. It's why, for example, on a plane, it can be loud as hell with the engines and people talking about blah. The moment a baby cries, everyone can hear it crystal clear as if the baby was sitting next to you. So I said, let's take advantage of that. Let's use those baby cries and the inherent anxiety it causes us in the score. The one big exception to this working method was the use of the clarinets. We've reached this dramatic apex in the film. Where do we go from here? And so I said, let's bring in some crazy color that you don't ever hear of this many of this one specific instrument, this ensemble of all bass and contrabass clarinets, which was recorded at Abbey Road.
It became clear that we weren't going to be able to use union players for the score. The instrumentation we were looking for, these bass clarinets and contrabass clarinets, there are just not that many of them. The only way we could do that was by going to London for them.
We toyed with the idea of flying to London for about 3 seconds, and then I started exploring options.
I got a phone call from Austin saying, I think I figured out this workaround. I think we can do this.
We set up a session at Capitol Records where we could go in and monitor in real time while they recorded at Abbey Road in Studio 2. It was so much fun, just bantering with the musicians over the talkback, and I think they really had a blast because this was practically every bass and contrabass clarinet player in London. These guys are usually, there's one of them and then a 100-piece orchestra, so they were all joking around. It was like almost this weird clarinet reunion going on in London. The nice last little touch, which was entirely Paul's idea, was for the end credits, after we've heard all this and there's building complexity and there's 1,000 layers going on, the end credit starts off with Jordan singing the lullaby. Her performance was true to a mother singing to her baby versus Lisbeth's, which is a professional, musician's performance. And so that was kind of that nice little just touch at the end.
Sweet little angels, it's time to